Hey, friends, welcome to another week of Justice in the Lectionary. This is a series I started a few weeks ago, basically to journey along the lectionary scripture readings. Now, I don't know if you are someone who follows the lectionary or even come from a tradition that follows the lectionary scripture readings, but regardless, I figured there's something beautiful about looking and cultivating the eyes to see justice in scripture, throughout scripture, in a decolonized way, and to do that in community. And so that's why I started justice in the lectionary, and been so grateful for those of you who've jumped in, journeying with me and sharing your reflections, and joining as paid subscribers to support my future PhD studies and my ministry and my writing, and all of that. So just and also my priestly ordination. So anyway, just really grateful for all of that. But before we jump into my lectionary reflections for this week, I wanted to do a quick plug to some of the books I'm reading right now. So I have ADHD brain. What I read varies from week to week. Um, and, I follow the advice of reading books like people sample fine wines, which is you just, have it all on a shelf and you just pull out whatever you're in the mood for that particular week. And that's the style of reading that works best for me. But the first book I wanted to plug was the book that I have written. And I actually have been reading this book lately. It's called The Justice of Jesus. And the subtitle is Reimagining Your Church's Life Together to Pursue Liberation and Wholeness. Um, I was actually honored this week to find out that the book was trending as the number one bestseller for liberation theology in Amazon Canada, and just truly grateful for that privilege. So thank you, fellow Canadians who are supporting the work of this first-time Canadian author in this way. But the reason why I actually have been reading this book lately is because I just wrapped up recording the audiobook for this book, which I get to narrate as well. So a true honor to get to narrate the audiobook. And I know all of us process information in very different ways. Many of us are auditory processors more than readers. So hopefully that makes this book more accessible for everyone who wants to engage with its content. I'm also teaching a course in partnership with the Deep and Wide Academy, Danielle Strickland. More information on that will be in this email. Be honored for you to hop on that as well if you want to unpack that with me over 5 weeks. So anyway, that's the first book, The Justice of Jesus, that I have been reading. Um, the next book that I've been reading lately has been this one from Reverend Munther Ishak, who's a Palestinian evangelical priest and pastor. It's called Christ in the Rubble, and the subtitle is Faith, the Bible, and the Genocide in Gaza. A very timely book for our times, and one that has just come out in the last couple of months, and highly recommend it. I'm still going through it. It's blowing my mind, teaching me to see things through fresh eyes, decolonized eyes, and I think you'd enjoy this too. So that's the other book that I'm reading. Another book I've been reading in the last couple of weeks is this one right here called Justice and Christianity. This is actually from a dear friend of mine. His name is Christy Samuel, and Christy is based in Sri Lanka. He's an Indian Tamil ministering as a missionary in holistic mission among Sri Lankan Tamils, and this book is beautiful. He's ministering in a post-war context in a country that was torn by civil war and genocide and things of that nature. And so his book, I value his perspective so much because he has experienced injustice in the global south as an evangelical and has wrestled with it, has wrestled to find the gospel and the good news and all of it, especially as a missionary to people in his own community. And yeah, Christy also works for Lausanne, which is a global movement of global church evangelicals. He works as the catalyst for their Freedom and Justice Network. And I got to meet him and hang out with him at the Freedom and Justice Network conference they did in Sri Lanka earlier this year in January. And got to hang out with Christy again when he visited New York a few weeks ago. So that's Justice and Christianity, another book I'd highly recommend. And last but not the least, this is more controversial, so I thought I'd save it for the end. I am reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. Malcolm X is a very polarizing, controversial figure, but I mean, really, when you prioritize justice, who isn't, right? Like, I'm a polarizing figure if you ask a lot of people. Um, but it's incredible. Like I actually didn't realize this, but the foreword to this autobiography is written by his daughter, who watched him be killed at a very young age and has the trauma from that. But what she remembers about her father is this devoted father and this person who loved his wife and his kids dearly. That's her memory of her father, who the world sees as either a prophet or a radical, right? Depending on who you ask. But I definitely fall in the camp of I think the guy was a prophet. Obviously, he was not a Christian, and for good reason. He was offended by, not just offended, was personally hurt and impacted by unhealthy parts of the Western Christian tradition, like the KKK, who killed his father in front of him at a young age. Um, and so I think there's a lot to be gained by challenging ourselves with perspectives, even outside the church, for justice that we're not accustomed to, because Jesus is everywhere, right? Christ is all and in all, as we'll see in the Colossians lectionary reading for today. So that's my recap of what I've been reading lately. Let's jump into the lectionary reflections for this week. So some really beautiful, beautiful text for this week. And I just thought it'd be appropriate to process them over video, just given the heaviness and nuances and complexity, but also the straightforwardness of these texts. So, so we are in Proper 13 this week in the lectionary post Pentecost, also called Ordinary Time. Um, and The first reading is from Psalm chapter 107, verses 1 to 9. I'm just going to pull out a couple of verses from most of the readings and kind of process thoughts and reflections there. But Psalm 107, verse 7 says this. It says, For he satisfies the thirsty, and the hungry he fills with good things. He satisfies the thirsty, and the hungry he fills with good things. Sit with that today, and sit with that this week, especially as we process news of what's happening in Gaza right now, where thousands of people and thousands of children are being starved to death. We're seeing videos and imagery, and we're being inundated with those images for good reason, to jolt us out of our comfortable consciousness here in the Western church. But sit with this verse in the midst of a week like that. He satisfies the thirsty, and the hungry he fills with good things. This is God's will, and this is God's desire for all of humanity, satisfying the thirsty and filling the hungry with good things. We see this in the Beatitudes too, where Jesus says, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness or justice, which is also a good thing. But also, blessed are those who hunger and thirst, period, right? This is God's desire for all of creation. And when we stand in silence and complicity about children in Gaza being starved to death, We don't just stand against our Palestinian neighbors and our Gazan neighbors. We stand against God. We stand against God's will and his desire for all of creation to flourish and for the hungry and the poor and the oppressed to be satisfied and filled with good things. When Western empires today participate in the complicity uh, of what's happening in Gaza right now, and the genocide, the starvation, and these are undeniable facts. When the Western Church today participates in that through our silence and our complicity and our voting patterns and behaviors while praying, "Give us this day our daily bread," we're not just violating the dignity of our neighbors in Gaza. We're breaking the heart of God and we're violating the will of God for all of creation to be well fed, especially those who are hungry and starving and thirsty. Let's go on to the next scripture reading from this week. And this is Psalm chapter 49. And I'm going to pull out a few verses from here because I think this ties in so well with what we've just seen in Psalm 107. Let's jump to verses 5 and 6, Psalm chapter 49. Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of my persecutors surrounds me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. And then jump to verse 10, verses 10 on. It says, when we look at the wise, they die, they die. Fool and dolt perish together and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations. Through they named, though they named lands their own. Mortals cannot abide in their pomp. They are like the animals that perish. Such is the fate of the foolhardy, the end of those who are pleased with their lot. Like sheep they're appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd. Straight to the grave they descend, and their form shall waste away. Sheol shall be their home. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. This is the cry of the oppressed. This is the cry of people in Gaza right now being starved to death. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Do not be afraid when some become rich, when the wealth of their houses increases, for they will die. For when they die, they will carry nothing away. Their wealth will not go down after them. I read this news article this week of some reporters just talking about the guilt that they had. Aid workers, actually, they were sent to Gaza to deliver food to children starving there and were blocked by the Israeli government from doing so. And while they were down there, they had to eat for themselves, right? So they ordered a bunch of uh, pizza from a delivery app in Israel, and they had a bunch of like many boxes of pizza delivered to them. And here's the irony: they're in Gaza trying to get aid to children, trying to get food to children, and they're not allowed to do this. But there's plenty of wealth and abundance on the other side with food delivery apps and pizza restaurants with an abundance of food and overfed people. And they're just kind of sitting in the tension of the two worlds. They're sitting in the tension of eating this food and enjoying the abundance for themselves, but not being able to deliver on their mission on the same part, on the same side of feeding these hungry children who are starved to death in Gaza by oppressive powers and institutions. And this is the world that we live in. There are hungry children all over the world, dying of hunger right now, being underfed and malnourished. And then you've got the parody, the contrast, the paradox of um, of the wealthy and the powerful having their fill and not even being concerned for those who die of hunger and starvation. And where is God in all of this, right? But here's here's the hope that I think at least is hope for people who are oppressed, and for us, is that at the end of the day, all of us die, and none of us take anything with us. And and regardless of our best attempts to oppress our neighbors or participate in systems that oppress our neighbors, we will meet the same fate as them, and 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 will be judged by God for our silence and our complicity, and our participation in injustice and oppression around the world, either through our silence or through our complicity. So, those are a few thoughts to wrestle with from Psalm chapter 49. Moving to the next scripture reading, Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 to 11, just to pull out a few verses from here. Um, Verse 1, so if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated, right at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Just to jump down a little bit, do not lie to one another, seeing that you have stripped off the old self with its practices. This teaching, by the way, isn't just for individuals, it's also for communities and for societies. The context in which scripture was written wasn't a Western individualistic context, it was very much a communal context where people were reading this as teachings, and they weren't really reading it for themselves from their personal Bibles. They were hearing scripture read and proclaimed at their synagogue, at their churches, um, and they were hearing these things read out loud to the community and not just to the individual. Um, Very different from our setting today, where you can just pull out Bible verses on your Bible app on the phone, and that's just not the original context that Scripture was written and taught within. So these are teachings to the community. It's the teaching of strip off the old self with its practices. You've been raised with Christ. You've been raised to proclaim the resurrection and the renewal of life for all of creation. So live this way. Verse 10 says, and have clothed yourself with the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge according to the image of its creator. In that renewal, there is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, enslaved and free, Israeli or Palestinian. But Christ is all and in all. Christ is all and in all. And Christ is in our neighbors in Gaza right now. He's in them. And we will one day be asked, what did you do for the least of these? What did you do for me? As Jesus teaches in the Gospels, for what you did for the least of these, for what you did for the least of these children in Gaza is also what you've done for me. Let's sit with that too, with the scripture reading for this week. And finally, Luke chapter 12 is about a parable um, about wealth, and it's about a dude who builds bigger barns to store his grain and his goods and to keep expanding his business in a very greedy, capitalistic, individualistic, consumeristic way. And this person is then confronted by God saying to him, you fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? And then Jesus goes on to say, for it is with those who store up treasures, so it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God, and are not rich toward the image of God in their neighbors. Friends, as we chew on the lectionary readings for this week, my hope is that you would wrestle with the abundance in your life that others don't get to enjoy in the world in this moment, especially in Gaza, in Sudan, and places around the world where evil systems of oppression are hindering life for our neighbors. And I hope you sit in the tension of the abundance that we get to enjoy, just like the aid workers bringing food in Gaza, not being allowed to deliver that food while getting to enjoy an abundance of pizza, some of the finest food of the land through the finest food delivery apps in the land for themselves. I hope we sit in that tension of why is it that we have been entrusted with this privilege here in the West with our comfy lives, and what is it that we're called to do in response to the scripture readings this week, and how is it that we can live our lives in a responsible way that stewards what we have well while keeping the least of these in mind. Those are my thoughts for this week. Thank you for journeying with me. Again, we'll be announcing dates for our next monthly subscriber, paid subscriber virtual chai. Would love for you to join. If you're not a paid subscriber already, every single dollar you give goes towards my seminary, my PhD education now, and my priestly ordination and training, for me to continue doing this work of awakening the Western Church to prioritize God's heart for justice for our marginalized neighbors by decolonizing the way we see ourselves, God, the world, scripture, theology, faith, spirituality, and yeah, I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you for tuning in, and blessings on your week ahead.